Welcome to today's webinar, Perplexing Punctuation Part 2. I'm Lori Monks. Hopefully you have seen Perplexing Punctuation Part 1 that was done a couple of months ago. It will be on both the forum and on the YouTube page. I had asked around in Q&A sessions and when speaking to students what they might like to see today in Part 2. And the resounding answer was just more examples of the same. There didn't seem to be anything new that they wanted added, although I have added a few things today. So what we're going to do is just quickly review the punctuation rules we learned from Part 1, go over the few things that I've added, and then we have a lot of examples that we can go through, and then a quiz at the end. So if today goes a little bit quickly and you haven't seen Part 2, I apologize, but I will do the best that we can here today. So let's review what we went over in Part 1. So first of all, we're going to talk about periods, basically when you have an independent clause or a complete sentence. You want to have terminal punctuation at the end. Sometimes you might have a question mark at the end. Sometimes you might have an exclamation point. But usually you've got a period at the end of a complete sentence. What I wanted to talk about here is when you have two complete sentences that are kind of similarly related in topic, usually you have a period after each one. What I commonly see as an error is sometimes people want to put a comma in between the two, and this creates a comma splice. What you can stylistically choose to do if your two complete sentences are really closely related in topic, you can join them with a semicolon if you wish to. So if you have two really closely related complete sentences, you can choose to join them with a semicolon if you wish. No more than two, but you can also use the period as you see above in the second example. I wanted to show you an example that ends in a Latin lowercase abbreviation, so that's just PRN. A common error that I will see is that people want to put another period at the end of that. So if your sentence ends in a Latin lowercase abbreviation, then the period that comes after that last letter just doubles as your terminal punctuation. So you don't need to add another period. And then if your sentence ends in a quote, the other really common error that I'll see is that people want to put the period after the quotation marks. So if your period ends, or sorry, if your sentence ends in a quote, tuck that period inside your quotation marks. Okay, so this is just a quick review of what we learned about periods. Now let's talk about conjunctions. So what a conjunction word is a word that joins two complete sentences together. So I wanted to go over an acronym that I use to remember the most common words that you'll see to join two complete sentences together. And so the acronym that I use to remember them is fanboys. So F is for, A is for and, as, or although, N is for nor, B is for but, O is for or, Y is for yet, S is for so. Now, these words don't always act as conjunctions, but if you see one of these words in a sentence and you notice that there's a complete sentence before it and a complete sentence after it, then it is serving as a conjunction word and it's joining two complete sentences together into what's called a compound sentence. Don't worry about the fancy wording, but all you need to know is that you need to put a comma before that conjunction word to join the two sentences together into one. So really keep an eye out for these conjunction words. There's more listed in your book of style, but you want to hook them together. Just think that comma looks like a hook. Hook the two complete sentences together when you see one of these conjunction words between the two. So here's an example. We have two complete sentences. He takes Tylenol for pain. That's a complete sentence. He prefers this to Advil. That's a complete sentence on its own. So below we've added but, which is one of our conjunction words. So he takes Tylenol for pain, but he prefers this to Advil. So we have a complete sentence before and after the word but. So we're going to put a comma before the conjunction word and join them together. Okay. So again, Here's our two complete sentences. I just wanted to show you something else here. Here we've added a different conjunction word and. He takes Tylenol for pain and he finds it helpful. Now here's a common error that I see. Now if we look at this, we have he takes Tylenol for pain coming before the word and. That's a complete sentence. But if we look at the sentence after the word and, finds it helpful, that's not a complete sentence. That's what's called a fragment sentence. It's missing that pronoun, he or the noun. If I were to walk up to you and say, hey, finds it helpful, you'd wonder what I was talking about. It's not a complete sentence. So in that case, and is not joining two complete sentences together. So it's not acting as a conjunction word in that case. So you don't place a comma before it. It's actually just acting like a joining word. We're telling you two things about this gentleman in this case. He takes Tylenol for pain and he finds it helpful. So because and doesn't have that complete sentence before and after it, you don't place a comma before and. Okay, and remember too, and we'll get to this in a second, when you have a list of things, two or more, a list of things, and they're all joined with and or between each listed item, we don't put a comma between. We'll get to that in a second, but this is a case where we've got a list of two things about this person. So this is something I see a lot. It's very tricky. So just remember when you're looking for a possible conjunction in a sentence, you need to have a complete sentence, both before and after it. Okay, so introductory elements. This is just added information before a complete sentence. So our complete sentence here is he will feel better soon. Hopefully it's just added information before that. Added frills, if you will. So we usually set that added info off with a comma before that complete sentence. Now, there is, of course, an exception to this rule. If that introductory element is 4 words or less and can answer when, where, why, or how often, then we don't put a comma after it. And this is just sort of something that takes a bit of getting used to because we're so used to having done this in regular English before transcription. It feels a little bit funny to get used to it, but this is the way that we would do it. So last Tuesday is only 2 words and it tells us when. So just try to keep that in mind. I call it the short phrase rule, basically 4 words or less and can answer when, where, why, or how often. So in this case, ever since he fell down, his ankle has been sore. So his ankle has been sore. That's our complete sentence. Our introductory element, ever since he fell down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. Even though it does answer when, it's more than 4 words. So we're still going to place that comma. And then in this case, we have, in general, he is ambulating well with crutches. So our introductory element is in general. In general is not answering where. If you can give me directions to general, we can talk about that. But in general is not answering where. It's just an introductory element. It may be short, but it's not answering when, where, why, or how often. So we do place that comma. So when you catch an introductory element, just ask yourself those questions. Is this 4 words or less? And can it answer when, where, why, or how often? If both of those things are true, don't place the comma. Okay, interrupting elements. So an interrupting element is added information right in the middle of your sentence. So in this case, our basic sentence is Dr. Smith will see her. The interrupting element is an excellent pediatrician. Dr. Smith, an excellent pediatrician, will see her. So we set that interrupting element off with commas. 2 things to think about with interrupting elements are, number 1, if you remove that text, you still have a complete sentence with proper grammar. And number 2, if you remove that text, the meaning of the sentence is not changed. So that information is not essential to the meaning of the sentence. So she will see her in approximately 4 weeks. In this case, if we take approximately out, we do still have a complete sentence. We will see here in 4 weeks, but the meaning has changed because there's a difference between seeing her in approximately 4 weeks and seeing her in exactly 4 weeks, right? So that would be essential to the meaning of the sentence. So we would not set it off with commas. Okay, we're buzzing through here, so I'm sorry. I know this is quick, but we just have so many examples to get to. So, okay, afterthoughts. This is added information coming after your basic complete sentence. And again, like your interrupting element, it's added information, can't stand alone as a complete sentence, and it's not essential to the meaning of the sentence. So he comes in today for a general physical. There's your basic independent clause. Last seen 2 years ago, that's added information. So we're going to set that off with a comma. Last seen 2 years ago is not a complete sentence on its own. So it's just added information about the sentence before. She will stay in hospital for another 3 to 4 days. Right, for another 3 to 4 days is not a complete sentence on its own, and she will stay in hospital is a sentence on its own, but the point of the sentence is that she's going to stay in the hospital for another 3 or 4 days, so that is essential to the meaning of the sentence, so we don't place the comma. Okay, hopefully that this is starting to make a little bit more sense. So these are all things that we want to think about when we're considering whether or not we want to place commas. And something that I do also find helpful sometimes when we're stuck is to read it out loud. Do you naturally pause there? Do you sound a bit strange if you pause in that spot? Sometimes if we sound a bit odd, if we're pausing in places you wouldn't naturally pause, you might have gone a bit comma crazy, so to speak. Okay, simple series lists. So a simple series list is just a list of things, and we've placed a comma between each listed item. So he has a history of hypertension, MI at age 52, and anxiety. So our 3 things are the hypertension, the MI, and the anxiety. So we have a comma between each thing. You will notice that we have a comma before and in that list. That is required in medical transcription. Okay, I have seen a list of diagnoses that were written in sentence form that were missing that comma, and it made the last 2 diagnoses into one thing, and it completely changed the meaning of the diagnoses. If you think of it in another way, if I had said, for breakfast, I had cereal, eggs, and juice, and I didn't have a comma before and juice, then technically eggs and juice would be mixed together in a really yucky smoothie, right? So in transcription, we want to make sure we have that comma. If there is not an and between every single item or an or between every single item, we need to have a comma before and at the end. Okay, and I know again, that's called an Oxford comma in regular English, something that we don't need in regular everyday English, but it's required in transcription. And again, because I have seen it change a diagnoses, that helps me remember about how important that is to have. Okay, so here's where I was talking about where and is between everything. He has a history of hypertension and an MI at 52 and an anxiety. So because we've got and in between every single thing, we don't need to have commas between them. Okay. Okay, now complex lists. We are getting a bit more complex, just like it says. So what a complex list is when you are making your list and you've got commas between commas. So our yellow commas are our original commas, and now we've added a little bit of extra information about the MI. He has a history of hypertension, MI at age 52, for which he had a stent placed, and anxiety. So when you notice that you've got a comma between commas, you're going to make those external commas into semicolons. And that's all complex list is. It's not quite as scary as it sounds. Excuse me. So that's just something to keep in mind and keep an eye out for. Semicolons and two independent clauses. So we talked about this a little bit earlier when we talked about periods. But basically, when you have two complete sentences, I want to show both of these here. He is on oxygen is a complete sentence. However, he refuses to quit smoking. That's another complete sentence. So they're very closely related. So you can put a semicolon before however and join the two together. Okay, that's also called a transitional word. However, is a transitional word. Now, you can choose instead to put a period before however. That's perfectly fine. With those transitional words like however or therefore, my personal test to see whether or not I want to use a semicolon, and again, this is a stylistic choice, but I kind of like to put but in place of however in my head and read it back. And if it flows, I tend to go with the semicolon. He is on oxygen, but he refuses to quit smoking. That makes perfect sense. I would probably lean towards the semicolon. If it didn't flow very well, I would go with the period, but that's just my personal choice. Either one is fine. It's an acceptable variation. Okay. All right, semicolons and two independent clauses. Again, here we go. Her blood pressure today is 125/82. Yesterday it was 140/90. We have two complete sentences here, but someone has put that comma there. We talked about that a bit earlier. Sentences about the blood pressure. You can choose to put the semicolon between. That's perfectly fine. You could also choose to put that period between. Again, we've got two complete sentences. They're closely related. Either way would be fine as long as it's not more than two complete sentences that you're joining together with that semicolon. Okay, we're getting there, guys. You guys are doing very well. Compound modifiers now. It was a well-planned surgery. This really throws everybody for a loop, these hyphens. So my trick for this, it only works with two-word combos that are not medical, but basically when it's coming before a word that it's modifying, so surgery, what I tend to do is test each word separately with that word. So a well-planned surgery, we know it means it was thought out ahead of time, but a well surgery would mean it was a healthy surgery. Doesn't mean the same as a well-planned surgery. So the two have to be hyphenated and work as a unit in order to make sense and retain the meaning you want. That's how I think about it, is does it have to work as a unit to retain the meaning I want? So that is working as a compound modifier, so I hyphenate it. When it's coming after the noun, so well-groomed, do we have to hyphenate that? What I do in that case is test it with just the second word. Sarah is pleasant and well-groomed. Sarah is pleasant and groomed. That makes sense. So you don't need to hyphenate well-groomed. It's not having to work together as a unit. In this case, Timothy has been very open-minded. If I was to say Timothy has been very minded, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean the same thing. So it does have to work together as a unit, and we hyphenate it. She carries her dearly loved teddy bear with her. So there is always an exception to a rule, it seems. So if your possible compound modifier starts with an adverb ending in ly, you don't hyphenate it. Okay, so if you were to look up in your book of style more about compound modifiers, you would see more of those rules there. But this is just a quick review. Okay, you didn't come this far to only come this far. And if anybody notices the word didn't is missing the apostrophe there, but I just liked the quote, so I put it in anyway. So here's where we're going to add a little bit of extra info for you. I wanted to talk about possessive nouns and plural nouns. And the example I'm going to use are different forms of the word patients. Okay, so the patients agreed that the ER wait was too long. In this case, we're just talking about more than one patient. So we're just referring to a plural amount. So it's just patients with an S. There's no apostrophe there. in this case, we're going to say the patient's abdominal pain was worsening. I'm referring to one person's abdominal pain. So we need to use the apostrophe to indicate that that abdominal pain belongs to the patient. And because it's one patient, I'm going to put the apostrophe before the S so that the word patient, the word before the apostrophe, is singular to indicate one patient. Okay, so the patient's abdominal pain was worsening. But what do we do if there's something belonging to more than one patient? Okay, the patient's chairs were getting uncomfortable. We've all sat in the ER for too long. We know how that feels. So in this case, the chairs belong to those patients, more than one patient. So in this case, we're going to move that apostrophe to go after the S so that the word before that apostrophe is plural. That will show us there's more than one patient that these chairs belong to. Okay. And then in this case, I just wanted to show that was one that was incorrect. All of the patient's gowns were ill-fitting. So in this case, the gowns belong to those patients. So yes, there's more than one patient, but the gowns belong to them. So it's actually going to be a possessive noun. So we need to show ownership. So we're going to put the apostrophe after the S right here. So it's going to look like this. There should be an apostrophe after the S. Okay. All right, inanimate possessive nouns. This is something that took me a while to get used to. And I think for me, it was just a lot of repetition and hearing these phrases more often and just kind of getting to know them. But the Book of Style talks about possessive phrases as these are things that refer to time, measurement, or money that should likewise retain their possessive expressions. So if you have the 3rd edition of Book of Style, it's in 8.2.10. If you have the 4th edition, it's in 5.3.10. So examples, one day's notice, $2 worth, 30 degrees flexion. You'll notice that they use a possessive form. Okay, so if we just think time, measurement, money, these are these types of expressions. These do take time to get used to. And I wanted to give some examples. These are really common ones that you would hear in medical reports. So he had a week's worth of antibiotics. So again, time. So also a week, it's singular. So the apostrophe is before the S to show a week, singular. The baby was born at 38 weeks gestation. So more than 1 week, 38 weeks. The apostrophe is after the S, and again, we're talking about time. He will return to the office in 2 weeks' time after the S because there's more than one. Whoops. With those two, just before I go too far, if we were to say he had a gestation or she had a gestation of 38 weeks, we wouldn't put the apostrophe. It's the expression 38 weeks gestation. There's an apostrophe there, but gestation of 38 weeks, no apostrophes. That just takes a bit of getting used to. Okay, I want to talk about its or its. Okay, she said, it's been a long time since I visited. So let's talk about its with the apostrophe. This is a contraction that means it is or it has. Okay, but if we have its without the apostrophe, it's a possessive form of it. We will let the cold run its course, meaning the course belongs to it. And it's just one of those strange things where we have a possessive that doesn't have an apostrophe. Okay, so just try to keep that in mind that it's with an apostrophe is actually a contraction. It is or it has. Whereas without the apostrophe, that's your possessive. It's just one of those really strange exceptions to the rule. Now, I do have the odd example that has its in it with the apostrophe. Remember, though, when you're transcribing in medical transcription, if you have a contraction that's not in a direct quote like this one is up top, you have to expand it. But I was trying to show some examples, so you will see one that I'm sure you all notice coming up. Okay, conditional sentences. I wanted to touch on these as well. So what these are, if she does not feel better, she will return in 2 weeks. So we have a condition here, if she does not feel better, and then we have a main clause, almost like if this happens, this is the result. So if she does not feel better, the result will be she will return in 2 weeks. When you start a conditional sentence with a condition, you need to have a comma. It's also an introductory element, to be honest, but you need to have a comma between that conditional clause and the main clause. Another thing to point out about these is if the main clause comes first, followed by the condition, there's no comma. She will return in 2 weeks if she does not feel better. It's kind of cool, and this has caught me on so many occasions because I always wanted to put the comma between them when the condition came second. But it's essential information, you know. She will return in 2 weeks if she doesn't feel better. You know, if she's feeling better, she's not going to return in 2 weeks, so that it's essential info. So just keep that in mind with the conditional sentences. If it comes first, the condition comes first, put the comma. If it comes last, you don't need it. Sometimes those conditional clauses can start with since as well. Since she felt better, she didn't come back. Okay, so I want to talk about numeric ranges as well. You may wonder why I have cowboys there. I've always called these the range rules in my head, so I always think of cowboys. So anyways, so what these are is when to use a hyphen in a numeric range and when not to. So basically, I've kind of reworded this a little bit, so that makes a bit more sense to me. But per the book of style, when you have a numeric range, you do not want to use a hyphen between those numbers if either of the numbers in the range has a decimal, if it has a comma in it. So basically, numbers over 1,000 can often have a comma. If either of those numbers is over 4 digits in length, so 1,000 and up. If you've got a negative number in that range, if either of the numbers accompanied by a symbol, think of percent signs, dollar signs, negative symbol, positive symbol. And then if that range uses the phrase from and through, so from 1 through 5, from and to, so from 4 through to 9, between and, so between 7 and 9. If any of those things occur in your numeric range, you don't use the hyphen. So I remember I had a Post-it note with all these things and written on it. It took me a long time to get used to them. And I see these errors quite often in reports. So I've given you the book of style references there. So if you have book of style 3, 657 and 1141 have the exact same notes. There's just repeated twice in book of style 3. And in book of style 4, it's 3.8.8. You definitely want to bookmark those because this comes up constantly in reports. Okay. Okay, so hyphens and numeric ranges. I wanted to show some examples. He rates his pain between 6 and 7 out of 10. So we have a between and an and phrase there, so we don't use the hyphen. He rates his pain 6 to 7 out of 10. So 6 to 7 is fine. We don't have any of those other issues. There's no decimals, no negative numbers, none of those other problems. So we can use the hyphen. The patient fainted 3 to 4 times on the weekend. Again, don't have any issues, so that can use a hyphen. There was a 70 to 80% blockage of the artery. We've got a symbol there, so we have to write the word to in between. The scar measures around 10 to 10.5 centimeters. So we've got a decimal there. That's why we've written out the word to. And then just a tricky one. This is called a suspensive hyphen. We expect them to have a 1 to 2 week stay. So a 2 week stay, this is a compound modifier. 2 week is describing the stay, but we've added a range to that compound modifier. So we use a suspensive hyphen for the first number in the range. So book of style 3, it's 6.5.9. Book of style 4, 3.8.10. So this is really It's a range. We're using the word to in there. I wanted to show that example because that does come up on occasion as well. Okay, so here come the examples. I don't know if we're going to get through all of this. We may have a perplexing punctuation part 3 with examples to go through. Okay, so what I wanted to show you is the example without the punctuation, and then I'm going to show it to you with. So I want you to just kind of think in your head how you would punctuate this. Today she had a slightly elevated BP, likely due to the stress of being here. Okay, so today she had a slightly elevated BP, that's a complete sentence. And then likely due to the stress of being here is added info about it. So we're going to set that off with a comma. It's not a complete sentence on its own, it's added info. So we're going to set it off with a comma. That's an afterthought. Since he felt increased swelling under his cast, he made an appointment with the fracture clinic. Okay, so if we think about that, we have a condition because he did this. This was the result. It's also an introductory element either way. So since he felt increased swelling under his cast, comma, so comma after that condition or comma after that introductory element, and then we have our main clause after that, also an independent clause. The history reveals GERD, hypercholesterolemia on Lipitor for the past 4 years, and a torn meniscus right knee in his teens. This one's getting a little bit more challenging, so just want you to look at that for a second. The history reveals GERD, hypercholesterolemia on Lipitor for the past 4 years, and a torn meniscus right knee in his teens. Hopefully the way that I'm reading it is helping a little bit. So let's look at this. We have a complex list. GERD, hypercholesterolemia, and then added info about that on Lipitor for the past 4 years. So we set off the added information about the hypercholesterolemia with a comma. So now we've got a comma between commas. So that's where these semicolons, we've got that complex list. And a torn meniscus right knee in his teens. So a torn meniscus in his teens is your phrase there, and right knee has added information about that torn meniscus right smack in the middle. So we have a complex list here. We have an afterthought about the hypercholesterolemia that we added. We've got an interrupter. Sometimes this could be, I would call this an appositive, which is added information about the noun right before it. We set it off with commas. We've got a complex list here. This is a challenging sentence. Okay. His headaches improved with physio 1 to 2 times a week, stretching and PRN rollbacks, but he continued to have headaches about twice a week, so he will add massage therapy to his regimen. His headaches improved with physio 1 to 2 times a week, stretching and PRN rollbacks, but he continued to have headaches about twice a week, so he will add massage therapy to his regimen. Okay, so we've got an independent clause here. His headaches improve with physio 1 to 2 times a week. 1 to 2, we use the hyphen because we don't have any of those range rule exceptions. Okay, and then we've added a list here, 1 to 2 times a week, stretching and PRN rollbacks. We don't have any added pieces of information in that list. It's just a simple series list. Now we have but. That's a conjunction word. And if we look, we have another complete sentence after that. He continued to have headaches about twice a week. So but is acting as a conjunction. So we've put a comma before it. And then we see the word so. That's another conjunction. Think of the fanboys acronym. And then if we look at the sentence after so, he will add massage therapy to his regimen. That's another complete sentence. So is also acting as a conjunction. So this is a long rambling sentence, and doctors will do that. So you can have more than one conjunction in a sentence. So we've got one complete sentence with a simple series list. We've got a conjunction that we're going to hook that on with a comma with a complete sentence. Another conjunction. We're going to hook that on with another comma. So a lot of the times the key is looking for where are your complete sentences. She sprained her right ankle last year and feels that it's still weaker than her left ankle. She sprained her right ankle last year and feels that it's still weaker than her left ankle. And keep in mind, I said we were going to have an example with it's in it that I wasn't going to expand. Okay. She sprained her right ankle last year and feels that it's, so it's here we're meaning it is. So that's the contraction. If you're going to do this in medical transcription, you would write it is instead. Still weaker than her left ankle. Now in this case, and is not acting as a conjunction because it's not joining two complete sentences together. If it had said and she feels, then now we would have a complete sentence before and after it, and we would put a comma before and. But in this case, we're just telling you two things about her. She sprained her ankle. She feels that it's weaker. So we don't put a comma before and. Symptoms included pain and redness and swelling, and wisely she decided to go to the ER for x-rays. Symptoms included pain and redness and swelling, and wisely she decided to go to the ER for x-rays. Okay, so symptoms included pain and redness and swelling. So that's a complete sentence on its own. It's a list, but they're all separated with and, so we don't need commas. And then she decided to go to the ER for x-rays. That's a complete sentence. So we see the word and there. That is acting as a conjunction now because it's joining two complete sentences together. So then, excuse me, I've got hiccups. Wisely is acting as an introductory element to the second independent clause. So when you see that coming after a conjunction word, you want to just look at the sentence after that conjunction word. Like just ignore from and back and look at from wisely on in this case. You don't need to put a comma after and. We're just going to go from wisely on. So wisely, comma. Wisely is one word. It doesn't answer when, where, why, or how after. So wisely, comma, she decided to go to the ER for x-rays. Okay, so I think sometimes when we throw in a conjunction and then we have an intro after it, it throws people off a little bit, but just try to really block out sections of the sentence and then piece it together for punctuation. Okay, she has a history of menometorrhagia, dilatation and curettage, and an eventual hysterectomy in 2018. This one's a bit tricky. It's trickier than you might think. She has a history of menometorrhagia, dilatation and curettage, and an eventual hysterectomy in 2018. So this is a simple series list, but it's tricky. So menometorrhagia is one thing. Dilatation and curettage, what everybody will want to do is put a comma after dilatation. But dilatation and curettage is one procedure that just happens to have two steps to it. So because it's one procedure, we don't put a comma after dilatation. I'm just trying to think. Open reduction and internal fixation would be another example of that, where it's one operation that has two steps. So say you broke a bone really bad and they have to go in, open up, put the bones together, and then pin. It's one operation, just happens to have two steps. So that's why this is a bit tricky. And then as you learn more about these procedures, that gets a bit easier to spot. So this is still a simple series list, but we're not going to put a comma after dilatation because dilatation and curettage is one procedure. Every other day she does yoga at the park and occasionally her friends join her, though not today. Every other day she does yoga at the park and occasionally her friends join her, though not today. Okay, so every other day she does yoga at the park, that's a complete sentence. Her friends join her is a complete sentence. We've got and, we've got our conjunction, we're joining two sentences together, so we've got our comma. Occasionally is an introductory element to her friends join her, but it's one word. it answers when, so we don't have our comma there. And then though not today is added information after that complete sentence. Her friends join her, so we set that off with a comma. So again, we're just breaking down where are our complete sentences and how do we punctuate those complete sentences on either side of those conjunctions. Okay, on exam, respiratory rate is 14, BP is 120/90. Okay, so on exam, respiratory rate is 14, period, BP is 120/90. This is one where I will often see a comma, but because they both have the verb is, they're both complete sentences. So we do need to have a period. But if there weren't any other vital signs, they're really closely related. You could put a semicolon there. On exam, resp rate is 14, BP 120/90, temp 37.2, pulse 73. So we've got one verb there. We just have one. That's a complete sentence, and the rest don't have verbs. So there's a couple ways we could do this. We could put a period after each vital sign. That's perfectly fine. Or you could put a comma after each one. If one of these had a verb later on, you would need to start a new sentence for that. So say it said pulse is 73, you would need a new sentence for that because the is would create a new complete sentence. So either one of these would be fine. He has arthritis of the right great toe. He has, however, stubbed it at least 100 times, he thinks. He sounds like me. He has arthritis of the right great toe. He has, however, stubbed it at least 100 times, he thinks. Okay. He has arthritis of the right great toe. That's one complete sentence. And then if we just look at the next one, he has stubbed it at least 100 times. That's your complete sentence. However is your interrupting element, and he thinks is added information. So when however is smack in the middle of a sentence and it's not joining two complete sentences together, it's an interrupter. So we're going to put a comma on either side of however. He has, however, stubbed it at least 100 times. And then we set the added information off with a comma. Okay, here we go with our possessives. The doctor's patients were playing on their cell phones in his waiting room. The doctor's patients were playing on their cell phones in his waiting room. Okay, so if we're referring to one doctor and it was that doctor's patients, then the apostrophe would go before the S. If we knew this was a waiting room for more than one doctor, the apostrophe would go after the S. And then patients, we're not saying here that something belongs to them right now. If we said the patient's cell phones, then patients would become possessive, but in this case, not. The patients belong to the doctor here, so doctors is possessive. Okay, it's a lot of information. I know I just wanted to go through as many examples as I could because that's what was requested. And then on the forum, I'm going to make a PDF so you guys can download these and go through them later. Okay, it's important to keep the cat to keep its coat clean. It's important to the cat to keep its coat clean. Okay, it's meaning it is important to the cat to keep its coat clean. So it's here is working as that possessive if we remember. And it's as a possessive doesn't have the apostrophe. And then here, it is meaning it is. Now, again, if this were a medical transcription, we would write out it is, but I just wanted to use this as an example. Since the doctor has a 2-week holiday planned, he will see the patient back in 3 weeks' time, or she can call the on-call clinic if needed soon. If needed. This sentence doesn't make sense. She can call the on-call clinic if needed sooner, if needed. Oh dear. Okay. Well then, if we had to punctuate this, since the doctor has a 2-week holiday, so in this case, 2-week is acting as a compound modifier. It's modifying holiday. So we're going to hyphenate 2-week holiday. So since the doctor has a 2-week holiday planned, he will see the patient back in 3 weeks' time. So let's talk about this for a second. Here is our introductory element, but also that conditional element as well. He will see the patient back in 3 weeks' time is your basic independent clause or your complete sentence. 3 weeks' time is that inanimate possessive we were talking about when it's talking about time in this case. So 3 weeks' time, it's more than 1 week, so that apostrophe goes after the S. And then or, I could see this in a couple of ways. You could see this as a list of things, or, but I'm seeing this as or being a conjunction because it's joining two complete sentences. She can call the on-call clinic sooner. So I would put a comma before or. On-call clinic, on-call is modifying clinic. You wouldn't have an on clinic and a call clinic doesn't make sense. So they're working together to modify clinic. And then if needed is added info. But to me, she can call the on-call clinic sooner if needed. She can call, if needed, I see. If needed, whoops, if needed should have been removed from that first example. It's in there twice. That's a typo we did not catch. Ever since he saw the cardiologist, he has tried to eat a better diet, but is tempted by candies, chips, and soda more than he is by fruits and vegetables. Ever since he saw the cardiologist, he has tried to eat a better diet, but is tempted by candies, chips, and soda more than he is by fruits and vegetables. Okay, so if we want to pick this apart, ever since he saw the cardiologist is going to be our introductory element because he has tried to eat a better diet. That's a complete sentence on its own. So ever since he saw the cardiologist is an intro, but it's longer than 4 words. Even though it says when, it's longer than 4 words. We're going to set it off with a comma. He has tried to eat a better diet, but. Now, if we look at but, it does have a complete sentence before it, but is tempted by candies, chips, and soda more than he is by that. A sentence starting with is not a complete sentence. It's a fragment. So, but is not acting as a conjunction, so we're not going to put a comma before it, right? This tricks people all the time. So just remember that's not joining 2 complete sentences together. So we don't need that comma. Is tempted by candies, chips, and soda. So we've got a list here. We don't have and between every item, so we're going to put commas between. We don't have any commas between commas. It's not a complex list, so just basic commas are fine. More than he is by fruits and vegetables. So here, fruits and vegetables are just 2 things separated by and, so we don't need a comma between fruits and vegetables. So the more and more that you do this, the easier that it gets. It's just lots of repetition. Okay, so let's pretend in this case that we've got an impression or a diagnosis, and they say, number 1, neuroma, right hand, third interspace. Neuroma, right hand, third interspace. Okay, so if your diagnosis is neuroma, right hand and third interspace are both pieces of added information about that neuroma. That can be called an A positive, added information about the noun right before. And sometimes your added information can be a list, right? So this is a list of added information about that neuroma. So we're going to set it off with a comma. It is kind of tricky, and you will see stuff like this often, where they just they're dictating off the top of their head. It's not always pretty. So we're going to just do the best we can to get it as grammatically correct as we can. If they had said neuroma of the right hand in the third interspace, beautiful, but they don't often do that. So this is added info about the neuroma. We're going to set it off with commas. Okay, so we don't have much time. We're going to do a couple of the quiz questions, and then I think what we'll do is we'll have another punctuation webinar, and we'll just do lots of quiz questions. So let's do a few. I think what I'll do is make it so that, well, actually, no, I'll just go through these just for a few minutes. No, you know what? I'm going to make it so that I can see. I know this isn't as pretty, but I do want to see your answers. So we'll do this. Okay. So, which of the following is correct? After lunch, she began having dyspepsia. Or B, she says she did not eat much. I cannot be sure. Oh, what just happened? Gave it away. I suggested yet again that she slow down and chew her food more thoroughly. So we've got one person says C. Yep, perfect. So here we do have that intro, but it's short and it answers when, so we don't want that comma. In this case, she says she did not eat much is a complete sentence, and I cannot be sure is a complete sentence, so we want a period between those or a semicolon. In this case, I suggested yet again, so yet again is an interrupter, that she slow down and chew her food more thoroughly. Great, perfect. I want to make this super tiny so you guys can't see it as well. Okay. Okay. Which of the following is incorrect? So we need to see the one that's wrong. So we have blood pressure 120 over 82, temp 36.7, pulse is 75 with periods between each. Blood pressure 120 over 82, comma, temp 36.7, comma, pulse is 75. Blood pressure 120 over 82, comma, temp 36.7, period, pulse is 75. Oh my gosh, all the B's are just coming in. Perfect. Okay, so you're right. B is incorrect because we have pulse is 75. So because that's a new sentence, because of is, we would need to put a period and begin a new independent clause. Perfect. Okay. Which of the following is incorrect? We will obtain a CT scan if no improvement. If no improvement, comma, we will obtain a CT scan. Or C, we will obtain a CT scan if no improvement. We will obtain a CT scan if no improvement. Perfect. A. I went quick and you guys really absorbed that info. I'm so proud of you. Perfect. So again, here we have that conditional clause. So remember, if the conditional clause follows the main clause, we don't use the comma. If you can flip it around so that that condition comes first, like here, then you place the comma. That tripped me up so much as a student. Which of the following is correct? The patient's baby was born at 37 weeks gestation. The patient's baby was born at 37 weeks gestation. The patient's baby was born at 37 weeks at gestation. The patient's baby was born at 37 weeks gestation. I'm reading them all. They're the same. They're just punctuated differently. Good job, folks. Good job. So patient, we've got one patient. So the apostrophe is before the S to show one patient. 37 weeks is more than 1 week, so the apostrophe is after the S. And that is an inanimate possessive, not a compound modifier. In this case, it's a possessive. Good job. Oh my goodness, I'm so proud. Okay, this is a bit tougher. Which of the following is correct? Oh, why not B? Okay, so in B, this is not acting as a compound modifier. This is it's a possessive. So if we go back and look, it's an inanimate possessive talking about time. And those I had to take notes on sort of examples of those expressions. They took me a long time to get used to. Which of the following is correct? His long inpatient stay was due to persistent infection, which finally resolved, and he was discharged to home as his wife is able to care for him. His long impatient stay was due to persistent infection, which finally resolved, and he was discharged to home as his wife is able to care for him. Got a bunch of B's there. Good job. Yay. You guys are making me so happy. So we have two independent clauses or two complete sentences. His long impatient stay was due to persistent infection. That's a complete sentence. And then we have another complete sentence. He was discharged to home. Which finally resolved is added information about that first sentence. And is your conjunction, joining your second complete sentence. So we set that off with a comma. We set your first afterthought off with a comma. And then as his wife is able to care for him, you could see that two ways. You could see it as another conjunction. His wife is able to care for him as a complete sentence, and as is a conjunction as well. You could see it as an afterthought. Sometimes you can see things more than one way, but that's awesome. Well, we might as well just keep going because we only have a couple here left. Which of the following is correct? This one's a tricky one. Orthopedic knee exam, including Lockman's, anterior and posterior drawer, and valgus and varus stress testing, was normal, indicating ligamentous stability in both knees. Having been a massage therapist, this is right up my alley, folks. Seeing a bunch of A's. Good job. So in this case, the basic sentence is orthopedic knee exam was normal. That's your basic sentence. Then everything that we tested is an interrupting element, just telling us what we tested. That interrupting element just happens to be a list. The reason that we don't have a comma after anterior is that anterior and posterior both apply to drawer, because there's an anterior drawer test and there's a posterior drawer test. Same with valgus. We don't have a comma after valgus because there's valgus stress testing and there's varus stress testing. So that's why there's no commas there. And then indicating ligamentous stability in both knees, indicating ligamentous stability in both knees is added information after that complete sentence. Good job. Okay, one more. Which of the following is correct? And these are all totally different, so this is tricky. David usually tests his blood sugars 3 to 4 times a week. They range from 4.2 to 6.3. The RCA occlusion, which was about 25 to 30%, was stented, and Nadine will have a 2 to 3 day inpatient stay, after which she will be discharged happily to home. C. I would rate my pain between 4 and 5 most days, but today it feels more like 7 to 8. Mary's sugars were up to 11 to 14 on her 4-day weekend at the beach, likely due to what she calls her beach snacks. Got a bunch of B's coming in. Okay, good job. My goodness, you guys, I'm so proud of you. So the first one is incorrect because David usually tests his blood sugars 3 to 4 times a week, comma. So we've got 2 complete sentences with a comma between instead of a period. So that's why that's incorrect. I would rate my pain between 4 and 5 most days, but today it feels more like 7 to 8. So yeah, we have a conjunction between 2 complete sentences. That's right. But the introductory element to the second sentence, excuse me, the second clause is short and it answers when, so there should not be a comma after today. Mary's sugars, the apostrophe should be after Mary and before the S. And also beach snacks, that period should be inside the quotes. Oh my goodness, I am so proud of you guys. So I am just going to come back in here and say, congrats, go get them. I am super impressed. Thank you guys for coming. I know that was quick, so if anyone's wanting a 3rd edition, let me know. Let me know what you might like to see in it.